it was really, in a way, that you could see from the first year of Trump administration, that this was going to be a world where Trump's sense of American power is going to make it harder and harder to believe that there's a rules-based order. China has had the leverage
Yeah.
to counter Trump's tariffs with a ban on rare earth magnets, because China has monopoly on rare earths and rare earth magnets. I think the Chinese are threatening German industrial base. You have Russians have occupied Ukraine, parts of Ukraine, so Germany is very scared. And Americans are now proving to be uncertain allies. Germany can lead the European Union into a good trade relationship where India has a surplus. Unlike with Russia and China, where we have massive deficit. We have a president of the most powerful country in the world who is unbound at home and unconstrained abroad. A person who, the opposition, none of them criticize the United States. And I think we have been rudely reminded of that reality.
Yeah.
Therefore, I think the challenge for India, or for many other countries, India at least is a big country.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Indian Express. This week, in fact, since the new year, a lot has been happening on the world stage. India is affected, of course, by all of it. Most recently, the German Chancellor visited India on a short trip, but quite consequential. Before that, of course, the invasion of the kidnapping or abduction of Maduro by the Trump administration. We'll come to your most recent column is, of course, on India-Germany ties, but I want to take you back to your three columns, almost back to back, were prophetic. The New Year one started with how to navigate a world without norms. Immediately after, almost Trump, Maduro, the Venezuelan president, former president, was abducted by the US. And then now Germany, about how to sort of maintain some semblance, democracies working together, rules-based order, things to benefit from each side that they have together. So I wanted to take you, in this world of, that column, the New Year column, in a world without order, or in a world where the sort of norms are now fraying, or certainly in a time of flux and the new norms haven't really been put into place. What kind of leverage does India have? We keep saying India has this great leverage on the international stage, but what exactly is it, given that if Trump tomorrow decides, let's say, that Asia is not a priority for him, or China is not, it's better to work with China rather than against it, what is the kind of leverages India has?
Yeah, first I think we wrote the world without norms before the Venezuela
it was prophetic.
operation happened. So it was really, in a way, that you could see from the first year of Trump administration, that this was going to be a world where Trump's sense of American power is going to make it harder and harder to believe that there's a rules-based order. And in fact, Trump's own interview to New York Times a few days ago, where he actually says, look, I'm not bound by international law. We already know that he bends the constitutional principles at home, that's at least is the charge against him. Whether it is most of these are disputed in courts, for example, on the tariffs, simply unilaterally without reference to the Congress imposing those kind of rules. The Congress is also asking to use force like it did in Venezuela. You need some kind of a congressional authorization, which also he says, look, I don't need it. I don't think the so-called war powers resolution matters. So in a way, we have a president of the most powerful country in the world who is unbound at home and unconstrained abroad. So for all those, we've been talking about American decline. I think we've been cautioning in our columns and in our videos that, look, don't buy this rhetoric about American decline. The US has so much power, and when we see it being unilaterally exercised, the rest of the world is simply trying to adapt. See, on trade issue, only China has had the leverage to counter Trump's tariffs with a ban on rare earth magnets, because China has monopoly on rare earths and rare earth magnets. So unless you have that kind of leverage, you don't have much choice, at least in the near term, to counter Trump. And I think That's where we are. So most countries are actually, even European Union, which is a big entity, as big economic entity as China, but they had to accommodate Trump's demands, and now they're also dealing with Trump's threat to annex Greenland,
Yeah.
which is part of a major
Yeah.
NATO ally, is member of Europe, which is a historic partner of the US. So I think that's where we are. So it brings me to the second part of the question. I think it is no point just talking about sovereignty, strategic autonomy, if we don't create the capabilities at home. That is, you can say, look, Venezuela's sovereignty was violated. But the fact is, history tells you that in the end, force is what matters. You can keep crying about sovereignty till the cows come home. But because Venezuela did not have the defenses available to prevent an incursion, where they can walk in, fly in into the bedroom of the president and take him away. So either you don't get into that kind of situations
Yeah.
with the big powers, you avoid getting into those kind of situations, you create domestic capabilities, you create partnerships. So therefore, merely referring to international law or saying that, look, these are rights are worthless if they're not implemented.
Yeah.
Rights are, don't matter if they can't be enforced. So I think that's where, in the end, unlike in a domestic situation where there are courts, there are mediation between different competing constituencies, international system is anarchic in the end. That is, those with the might can do things. Those who don't have the power will have to suffer the consequences. And I think we have been rudely reminded of that reality.
Yeah.
Therefore, I think the challenge for India, or for many other countries, in India at least is a big country. Nobody's going to invade and take over this country. But I think we need to do a lot of other things. For example, on the question of Chinese denial of technologies or of US trade pressures. So a large country, despite being the fourth largest economy, we also face pressures. Therefore, internal reform, self-strengthening are the key. And I think without this, the rest of the rhetoric makes very little sense.
Now a little looking back, a little looking forward. I think we were someone we got a letter to the editor. Some things is that we've heard balancing act and navigating uncertainty. Now for some years now, we've been in our editorials at the Express, we write that a lot. How do you think it's time, apart from just given the current reality? So a lot of this capacity building is medium term to long term, economic
Mm.
strength, reform, defense, diversification
Yeah.
in what we have today, do you think, including in the neighborhood, for example, do you think
Yeah.
and even with, say, sort of coming to some kind of thaw with China, which we see, do you think that it needs to
Yeah.
be a more proactive diplomacy now, or have we been done fairly well on that front?
No, I think I am skeptical. Diplomacy can only solve a small part of the problem. That is, if we don't have the domestic capability, diplomacy is of no consequence. Diplomatic weight comes with domestic capabilities. So I think at this point, when you are under serious pressure, is to keep your head down and manage it,
Yeah.
but build up the capabilities. I think that is what. So that requires domestic economic policy, domestic technology policy, domestic reform, and domestic unity. Because if internally you're not united politically, like in Venezuela. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the opposition parties have been saying the elections were rigged.
Yeah.
A person who, the opposition, none of them criticized the United States.
Yeah.
They said, damn good, you got rid of a dictator. So I think it's not enough to say sovereignty, that if you don't have an internal political consensus, social cohesion, and internal unity. Of course, in a democracy, there's competition for power, there is competing ideas, but underlying that, there must be a core consensus on which the society functions. If you don't have it, outsiders will take advantage of it. And I think that is the reality again. But we also noted it in the case of Somaliland, recognition by Israel. So there again, if country Somalia is fragmented,
Yeah.
if we don't internally come together and say, look, we are one country, we have problems, but we'll manage it in a constitutional sense,
Yeah.
and then we keep fighting, others are going to take advantage. So I think that's where we need to constantly remind ourselves, given our high profile diplomacy of the last many years, that the high flying diplomacy must be rooted in domestic strength and domestic unity. So therefore, cultivating that internal unity between parties, between political classes is very, very important. But that is the core. Good diplomacy helps.
Yeah.
But in the end, if your product is defective, diplomacy can't fix the problem.
So the other, just as a follow-up actually, between this internal, what happens internally, so we've talked about this many times before, but Bangladesh is coming up for an election right now. I mean, however, whatever the nature of that election, it is
Yeah,
not, there will be, even if it's limited, as it has been arguably in the past with the
yeah,
Awami League's later years as
yeah,
well. India has become almost being seen reportedly as almost a partisan player. That, and also that our
yeah,
domestic politics, as we criticize them for certain
yeah,
things that are happening under the interim government, they are pointing the finger back. I mean, the lack of domestic harmony, if you want to put it, or a politics that does not respect that kind, or seems to, at least outside the country, be anti-minority. Do you think that,
yeah.
especially in the neighborhood, which is for us as important, I mean, if the neighborhood is unstable, this great power stuff is even more, esoteric.
Yeah.
What do you make of that connection now, especially with Bangladesh, which was still recently a success story?
Look, I think in the South Asian neighborhood, I mean, I think we are too deeply intertwined with our neighbors because, after all,
Yeah,
this was one country before, to 1947. Then it became two countries. Then it became three countries. But the problem, and then we have overlapping communities, overlapping languages, overlapping majorities, minorities. So I think you have actually a very complex situation because the partition of the subcontinent has created a set of challenges. You have sovereignties layered over what was
culture.
essentially a unified society. Therefore, I think the burden on India to manage the neighborhood relations becomes especially acute. That is, neighbors resent Indian dominance. They sometimes they come to you for help.
Yeah, yeah,
One set of people want India to help them in their own power
yeah,
struggles. Another set of people say, look, you're being hegemonic. So I think that's part of life. And I think that's where we have to constantly manage. We also have to recognize, look, our neighbors have politics of their own.
yeah,
It's not just about India,
yeah,
that if you have sovereignty, you have a politics, those politics they contest. And I think India, unfortunately, gets dragged into those politics.
yeah,
And in the Bangladesh case, of course, is an extreme case where we were directly involved with the creation of Bangladesh. We are affiliated with, seen as being siding with one party. So I think that needs extra care in managing domestic politics and the consequences of Bangladeshi domestic politics for bilateral relations. I think there's still some hope that if the elections are over, things will calm down.
yeah.
Then we should be able to really begin to engage the new
No
government
problem. Yeah,
without any prejudice
yeah.
and to find a way forward.
So my final question, actually, with the Chancellor Scholz's visit, is a lot in the past there was when it comes to multipolarity gets thrown around, at least since I think or some version of it since the Nolanite movement days, that India, neither superpower, do your own. So BRICS was one attempt at that. They seem rarely to succeed. Now this is India, EU, and maybe other middle powers we're looking at where it's possible. What do you think is the pragmatic way moving forward? Of course, it's strengthening bilateral because a lot of people are talking this also because the European government's chiefs are also coming in for Republic Day. So we're going to have more focus on Europe, and that's an FTA that is being looked forward to. What do you make of this attempt again? It's sort of this promotion of multipolarity. Is it more rhetoric, and you still have the superpowers are still the superpowers?
I think there's always a danger with slogans like multipolarity, strategic autonomy, these things tend to get a life of their own and lose touch with reality. Here is the fact. I mean, I think uh, while there are several actors in the international system, they're not all equal.
Yeah,
Our relationships with each one of them has its own logic and complexity. And for example, you have a trade dispute with the US.
yeah,
But that problem of trade with the US is not going to be sorted out by you reaching out to Russia or China.
yeah,
Russia barely imports $5 billion. You have China imports 15, but our trade deficit with China is massive. It is the US that takes almost $80 billion worth of Indian goods exports and a massive amount of service exports. So I think to believe that these are switchable commodities.
yeah.
US is a large trading partner. And over the last 30 years, I think we've developed a deep economic, political, and defense relationship. But unfortunately, I think we've neglected Europe as a strategic entity for many,
Right.
many years. But today, I think Europe is the second largest trading partner for us. There are large number of developed countries there. The EU, European Union, is a common economic entity. And I think it's only in the last few years that actually we've begun to engage seriously on a free trade agreement
Yeah.
with the European Union, as well as to up the strategic partnerships, that is military, technological
Yeah.
partnerships. What's happened is while France has been a good partner for us for many years,
Right.
countries like Germany were either paying attention to Chinese market or they was totally on the defense side, they were totally tied to the Americans.
Yeah.
Now I think the Chinese are threatening German industrial base. You have Russians have occupied Ukraine, parts of Ukraine, so Germany is very scared. And the Americans are now proving to be uncertain allies. So, in a particular, that's a context in which Germany, which has been a reticent, docile power, largely accepting the domination of US
Right.
since the Second World
Yeah.
War, today says, look, it has to take more responsibility for Europe. It has to increase its defense spending, and it has to reach out to other countries outside the Anglo-American, outside the European alliance system with the Americans. And I think Chancellor Merz said this as much.
Yeah.
He's looking beyond NATO, looking beyond Europe to build partnerships, and I think that's a context in which we have an opportunity here to work with Germany and build capabilities. I mean, so this is not just we should not turn this into an abstract rhetoric.
Right.
We can, Germany is going to spend $200 billion a year on defense. It wants to increase its defense production. So, other places where we can collaborate with them.
Right.
Germany
Right.
is a major trading partner. Germany can lead the European Union into a good trade relationship where India has a surplus,
Yeah.
unlike with Russia and China, where we have massive deficits.
Definitely.
So I think this is an opportunity to take it. I mean, but don't get too carried away by ideological thing. There is a practical opportunity today in Europe and Germany. We should simply take it.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. We'll speak again hopefully next week. And thank you everyone for watching. Read the pieces. They're on the indianexpress.com. Thank you so much.